Welcome to our podcast, and my guest today is Alicia Hanson. Alicia, it's good to see you.
See you too.
Alicia and I go way back to when she was in high school, and she was a friend of my son Matthew. And I'd like you to just tell our audience a little bit about your faith journey. And I'm going to tell them the bottom line first, and then we'll build up to this. We're approaching Easter, and Easter's about resurrection. It's about overcoming death by the God's grace and power. And you faced the possibility of death in the past, and you've overcome by the grace of God. And we're going to get into that story in time, but that's where we're headed. Alicia, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Um, I'm married. I have six children. I got to know you through um, your son Matt. Of course, I didn't get to know you through him very long, but do you just want me to talk about?
Yeah. Just tell your story. Tell some of your testimony. What happened?
Okay. I met the story that I share with other people is, I was just kind of like a regular high school student. Family was, my parents were divorced since I was six. I had moved across town. I was at a new high school, and I met Matt. Uh, he was very intentional about making friends with people, and he kind of sought me out, sought my friendship out. We met when he was taking pictures of the cross country team when I was on it, and then for like a whole year after that, he was just super friendly. He loved people,
Yeah.
and he loved to talk to people about Jesus and what Jesus meant in his life. And let's see, I was a junior at the time. So as a junior in high school, I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But Matt
Do you
was
seem
always
like
funny.
a goofy kid in a way, or what?
Oh, totally. I mean, he was so hilarious and was just very self-effacing and but always interested in people,
Hmm.
very, I guess he didn't have guile. He was guileless, he wasn't like concerned about really what people thought about him. At least that's the what he put
Yeah.
forth.
Yeah.
So he really had an interest in people. And I remember he would talk to me about, ask me about my family, and he would tell me all about yours. I remember him telling me about all of his siblings and his parents. And I remember calling his house once, and on your old voicemail, it had this big long thing about living streams, and I was always like, "What? Who are these people? Do that guide trips down the river? Like, what is this living streams?" I had no idea what it was. I was totally like, "What? I don't know if I have the right phone number." Anyways, he kept trying to get me to come to Young Life with him, but my mom basically just didn't let me do anything during the week, during the school week. And then it's been, gosh, how many years has it been now? Since 92. So it's 33 years ago, we went
Yeah.
tubing down the Salt River, and there was a terrible accident. And then Matt drowned and was in the hospital for 3 days. And, you and Christina and a lot of people at your church were just very instrumental in, first of all, you and Christina embraced Matt's friends who survived this trip, who I guess maybe in Christian economics or metrics would be like, why didn't Matt survive? He was
Right.
very evangelical. He just loved people. He was really good about saving the faith. Why are these kids alive and not my child? Which now, as a parent myself, I can see like, gosh, it would have been so easy to be bitter and cut off from the people that Matt had been befriending all along. But you guys were extremely receptive to us. That just spoke volumes to me. Actually, I forgot one of the best stories was about a month before Matt died. I remember we were at your house, and Matt wanted us all to come up and see your guys' bedroom. You remember he had that little bedroom on
Right.
Anderson? He was like, "You guys got to come up and see my parents' bedroom. It's like this little room on top of the house." And so we all went up there, and Christina had some perfume, and I remember I picked it up and smelled it, and I went to put it back down on this little vanity that she had, and I
Uh,
chipped the corner of the vanity. And I was like, my gosh,
oh my
I
God.
get me out of this house as soon as possible. It was horrifying to me
Oh,
because when I broke stuff or spilled stuff or anything like that at my house, it was just like the end of the world, right? So I went downstairs and Matt was like, he went up to Christina and was like, Mom, Alicia, she chipped this thing and she's feeling horrible. And Christina came up to me and said, You know, Alicia, things are important, but people are more important, and I forgive you." And that's a story that I've shared with people a ton. And the cognitive dissonance, that's the best way I can describe it. Like it was like I was surrounded in this bubble of like I was so amazed at these words. And we were driving out to go to Rawhide that night with a bunch of friends. And I just remember sitting in the back of the car being like, what just happened to me? So like this whole idea of forgiveness was, it just really rocked my world. There's no other way to put it. And then about a month later is when we first came to Living Streams, and I saw people, singing worship. I met Michael Carpenter, so
Yeah.
nice. I met a lot of people that I still remember. And then the very next day, we went tubing down the Salt River, and Matt drowned.
Tell us about that. I'd like some more
About,
details because I can't even believe that I've never really asked you to describe what happened on that tubing trip.
well, I can believe it. I had never been down the Salt River before. This was like a first to me. And it was just like a normal day. You go and you rent your tubes, they drive you up to the top, they drop you off. And our friend group was we were a pretty innocent group. We weren't like drinkers, we weren't smoking pot or smoking or doing anything like that. I remember we had even those high C fruit drinks and like snacks and stuff like that. And there was about seven of us. And we were just tubing down the Salt River. It was super normal, just a very normal day. And then there's this spot on the Salt River that actually the Bush Highway goes over. So if you ever drive out there, right where the bridge goes over, you had to have driven this way before, but
Yeah.
right there where the highway goes over, there's like a bend in the river, and there's kind of like a sheer face on one side where you can't really scramble out because all along the river is very much, it's rocky shores.
Right.
We were standing up throughout this thing, like switching tubes, just, floating
Playing
down the
around.
river in
Yeah.
June. Yeah. And so then we did have a rope, which everybody did. People there tied their tubes together. It was really not a big deal, though. It was tied to one tube, and then it was tied to I can't remember. I think it was tied to mine, and it was tied to Barry Camerzel's tube, and then Matt was holding the slack of it in his lap. And I still don't even know exactly what happened, but it was like we just were going around that corner. Wasn't even like fast or scary. And then all of a sudden, Matt slips straight down into the water. And it like happened so that when it happened, my tube whipped around and I literally saw him go whoop. And then he was an anchor. I was stuck there. It was like, then Barry had the tube part, the rope that was connected to him. And I think it was even wrapped around his ankle, if I remember correctly. So it was kind of like this heightened situation of like, oh my gosh, like I don't even know how he got disentangled from that and scrambled up to a point where he could get out of the water. And then I was still there. And I remember I was tugging at the rope because, I was stopped in the water and Matt never came up. And so I knew this rope is connected to him, and I would pull at it. And it just happened to be that spot, it was so deep, I couldn't see him. Um, and the water was so fast that every time I pulled, it started to suck, my tube down into it. So obviously, naturally, I would stop, and there were people, sitting on the rocky side, on the other side, and they saw what was happening, and they drove off and went to get help. And somehow I got out and got onto the side of the river where we really had to scramble. It was a very kind of treacherous situation. And then we all started running, up and down the water, being like, well, maybe Matt just went under and he's actually down here. Maybe Matt is back here. Maybe Matt is over here. So for like 15, 20 minutes, we're running along the shore trying to figure out, where did he go? And then the sheriff's department showed up in one of those um, boats that you see like in the Everglades with the big
Hmm.
fan
Yeah.
on the back. And they come up the river, and all they did was pick up my tube and hold on to it, and then the weight of their boat just pulled, and then Matt came out of the water totally, unresponsive. And so here we are, these six remaining teenagers that were on this trip were just like, oh my, what happened? I mean, even now, just saying it, it's like
It's powerful and
the physical
shocking, huh?
response.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then we went to, they took us to the sheriff's department that was there and they questioned us and they were like, were you guys drinking? What were you guys doing? And they were asking all that kind of stuff. And we were like, no, we had no alcohol. And they did not, they weren't believing us, but they had to let us go. And then we just drove straight to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then that whole
Yep.
next week,
Things unfolded one step at a
things
time.
unfolded. Yeah.
I appreciate you telling us that story. I mean, that was the most shocking day of my life, June 1st,
Mine too. Yeah.
1992.
1992.
And yeah, Matt had come upstairs to our bedroom before you guys took off on the river, and he said, "Dad, hey, I want to borrow a hat because I
That
got
hat, we were
sunscreen
looking for
on."
it.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
got sunscreen on, Dad, and because he knew that was always a deal for me, make sure you got
Yes. Yeah.
sunscreen, wear a hat, and all that. Um, and I remember your reaction because you and your friend Carl had come to the church the day before on the Sunday. And I said, well, what did you think of the church? And you were like, it's all right. It's sort of like you're trying to be
I
polite.
was 17. I was
Yeah.
17.
I'm like, well, do you want some lunch then? We can at least make you a good lunch. And because you always want to know how do people respond, especially if they don't know the Lord. And but then when we were in the hospital with you guys, because you came every day and your friends came and a couple of hundred other people came and we had worship songs and we had people praying for a miracle. And it was a combination of heartbreaking and crushing. And then after 3 days, Matt was brain dead. He was brain dead from the beginning because if you're underwater
Yeah.
for 20 minutes, they explained to me it's not a coma that somebody wakes up out of. It's like the hard drive of the brain has been erased. And we got the best second opinion we could find from a trauma doctor and so forth. But it was life changing for us. I wept every day after that for months and months, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. But I did know this that Matt loved you and Carl and Barry and all your friends, and therefore I wanted to invest my life in what he was investing his life in. Because ironically enough, a year or so earlier than that, one of the elders of our church had come up to me and said, I'm really concerned, Mark, because you don't really seem to show much interest in our teenagers, because he had a teenage daughter and a teenage son. And I'm like, dude, will you give me a break, please? I mean, we've got hundreds of people. The businessmen want my attention. People in
Yeah.
crisis want my attention. I've got teenagers myself. I love them, but
Yeah.
I am not going to be spending a ton of time
No.
with the teenagers in our church. I just don't have the capacity. And that guy and I had a lot of tension. But you know what? When Matthew was in the hospital those 3 nights, the first night he said to me, Mark, you and Christina go home and get some sleep. I'm going to stay here in the hospital all night. So somebody's there with Matt all night. And his name is Chuck Marvin. And I saw his love. I saw his commitment. He wasn't just my critic. He was my brother in Christ.
Yeah.
And he had the kind of job where he only got like 2 weeks vacation a year. And he took that week off so that he could be there in the hospital every night. And it was precious. Now, I went home with Christina. I slept 1 hour,
Oh,
literally
I'm sure.
1 hour.
Yeah.
It was like waking up in a really bad dream. But
Hmm.
so over
Well,
the
it's funny you say that because I remember when we first came to your house and Matt introduced me to you. I can still never remember. I'm sure it's the Mark Buckley stare. It was like, "Hi, Mom, Dad. This is Alicia, and this is so and so, and whoever else was with me." But I just remember you were in your old kitchen working, and you were like, "Hi, nice to meet you." I remember like, "Oh my gosh, what did I do? I'm terrible." But now having known you for so long, I just know you're this like intense person.
So
You're friendly.
when maybe not, that just depends. Kelly was dating Matt Demore when she was in high school a few years later, and she said, Dad, Matt thinks when you stare at him you can see right through him. And I said,
Yeah.
well, tell Matt it's true. I can see
Yes,
right
exactly.
through him. I was a teenage boy myself. I know what
Yeah,
they're interested in, you know.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but well, we really grew to love you because you came and hung out at our house all the time, and Chuck's word came to pass because I cared more about being with teenagers for the next couple of years than with anybody else because you guys filled a void in our heart, you know, in a
yeah.
beautiful way. And then there's another guy that would come and hang around our house. I think he was interested in Kelly a little bit, and his name was Jamie. And you got to know him over the
Yeah.
years, didn't you? How'd that work out?
Um, yeah, well, since we got married, it's worked out. Yeah.
And what
Uh,
people can't tell by seeing they can if they're watching this broadcast, they can see that you're beautiful brunette and all, but they can't tell that you're actually 6 foot. What? How
six
tall are you?
two, yeah.
Six
Six
two
two.
at least.
Yeah.
And when
Yeah.
you guys got married, Jamie said, "And I married the tall girl," you know, and he
Yes.
was so
Yeah.
proud of you, and for
Yeah.
good reason. For good reason. And one other little side note is that you guys got married in a Catholic church, and because
Uh-huh.
Jamie was a committed Catholic who loves the Lord, and you asked me to participate, and that I was doing the wedding ceremony with the deacon in the Catholic Church, and he said to me, "Well, would you like to wear the robes?" And he shows me all
Yeah.
these priestly robes, and I immediately said, "No, no, I definitely don't want to do that." And then I thought about it for a moment. I thought, you know what? I went to the Catholic Church the first 18 years of my life, and I didn't ever want to go back there. But this is going to be the one time in my life that I should probably go for it. I should probably wear those robes. And when I walked out, I just could imagine the shock of the people of Living
Oh yeah.
Streams when I walked,
Mm-hmm.
because there was several hundred people there,
Mm-hmm.
walked out for your wedding wearing the robes of a Catholic priest. I was
Yeah.
shocked myself, you know.
With the deacon who had a big beard, and it was one of the years that one of the Lord of the Rings movies came out, and I remember
Uh-huh.
somebody came up to me afterwards and they were like, "That guy looked like Gandalf." So he was shocking to them also, and
Yeah,
then
and
you.
then yeah, it made a great impression. But so you and Jamie got married and you had a daughter, a wonderful girl. What was your philosophy about childbirth, marriage, and all that?
Well, one of the things that enabled Jamie and I to even get married, because he was Catholic at the time, I was not. I have since converted, but I was evangelical Christian, but I was not interested in artificial birth control. And so we saw eye to eye on that. And I was really, so the term that is thrown around in the Catholic Church a lot is open to life.
Hmm.
And the thing I've talked about with a bunch of my friends who have a bunch of kids or don't have a lot of kids because they were infertile or whatever their circumstances are, is that the part you don't understand about being open to life is that you are also open to death, open to your own death, open to the death of the children that you bring into it. I mean, just as soon as you're born yourself,
You got a
you're
clock
gonna die.
ticking. Yeah,
Yeah,
someday.
we're all terminal, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I was open to having children. I
Hmm.
wanted to have my parents both were one of seven. And as much as they had a lot of dysfunction and stuff in their families of origin, and things were not always, there were some aunts and uncles that I haven't seen, forever, for a super long time. There's just a lot of that kind of stuff. It was, I don't know, there was something knowing that there was this kind of like provenance where they came from these big families, right? And then my parents had us three kids and they got divorced. So of course they didn't have any more kids. And my neither one of my parents had any more children. They have various stepchildren through their remarriages, but no, they didn't have any more natural children. So it was just me, my older brother, and my younger sister. But I always knew that I wanted to have a lot of kids. Like the older I got, I wanted to have a big family. And maybe that was just like innate. Maybe it was me wanting to create a family with a lot of people. I'm like, you mean, you know what it's like coming from a big family? There's
I'm a
problems.
family. I'm one of 8 kids, and I loved. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's. It's crazy. My
there's
when my
problems. It's fun.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's
it is.
problems.
And it takes all your money. They take
Yeah, yeah.
all the money that you ever even thought of. Um, Yeah, we wanted a big family too. Christina was only, she got pregnant 5 times. We had one miscarriage and 4 babies, and that's all. Then her uterus gave
Yeah.
out. But I love a big family.
Yeah.
But before we get into some of the drama of your childbirth, I would like to just ask a little bit more clarification
Okay.
on how
Okay.
you became an evangelical Christian. How did your faith
Okay.
come in Christ come alive?
So a few weeks before Matt died, he took me, just me, he was giving me a ride home from some event, but he was like, "Hey, I want to take you somewhere and show you something." We drove out to the Scottsdale Princess, we walked around, and that was when he really shared about Christ, how he has a plan for you, he loves you. And and like thinking back, it's just amazing that he had the guts to do that.
Hmm.
Um, and just the timing of it, it was kind of, and I do remember listening to it all, but a lot of the vocabulary was new to me. Now I was like raised Lutheran until my parents got divorced, and then we just really didn't go to church. I mean, I didn't even know what Easter was actually until
Hmm.
like my first Easter after Matt had died. I was like, oh, so that's the part that Jesus plays. I mean, I was just very unchurched.
Yeah, yeah.
So, um, and then, Matt died. But when he was in the hospital, there was a lot of people sharing with me about Jesus, how Jesus changed their life. I remember Alan Heller, Polly Heller talking
Hmm.
to me, um, and some other people too whose names escape me, but, just talking about the importance of Christ as their savior. And then what really did this for me, which is I remember being at the funeral and it was an open casket and I saw Matt in there and I was like, that is Matt's body, but Matt is not there.
Right,
And growing up in a modern world that's very materialistic, it's like, you don't have that many options to look at a person and be like, oh, they're not there. Like you have a body, you have a soul, right?
right.
Like where is Matt? And so I really spent that summer. I started going to Living Streams. I think there was youth group activities that I went through. Cindy Ontiveros reached out to me, which is actually she was a person that Matt had told me about
Uh-huh.
back when he was first telling me about Christ in general. Um, and I prayed. I was like, if this is real, like I want to learn more about it. And there also was kind of like a motivation of being like, I want to know where Matt is. I want to eventually be reunited with my friend. I mean, that really is when you're kind of immature, you're just like, yeah, where'd my friend go? I want to be where my friend is someday. So that was kind of like gateway. But then the more I got into, going to church, reading the scriptures, um, and really kind of thinking of myself as a body and a soul, and that God spared me for some reason. What it was, I didn't know. Um, and just that whole process of, I mean, it's like a years long process. In the Catholic Church, they talk about how conversion is like a daily thing. You have
Hmm.
to be like, all right, yes, I am choosing you again today, Lord. Like I am following you again today, Lord. So it's been like a lifelong conversion of just being like, yeah, like when things go south in my life, things don't go my way, which, as we all know, happens a lot. God has a plan, right? Trusting and that real gift of faith that you don't understand. Like I don't understand things like the Trinity. Like I can't conceptualize it here on earth.
Hmm.
It's like God is Father, God is Son, God is Holy Spirit. But you have this gift of I believe it. I don't understand it, but someday I will grasp it more fully.
Hmm.
And then 2 years after Matt died, we had um, our mutual friend Dan Murrow, who I had befriended after Matt had died. Your old neighbor. He died when we were working at camp up in Washington State, and that was another like turning point for me. I remember sitting at the camp where we were and praying and being like, God, here I am again. Like another friend has died, has drowned. I
Another friend
have
who
to either
loves
choose.
you too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Another friend who loves me, who I loved, who I had fun with, who loved you, Lord, who was here this summer, volunteering at this summer camp, has died, and he was 16, 17 years old. And I specifically remember sitting and looking at the lake and thinking, well. I could choose to be like, no, I don't believe any of this anymore. Or I could be like, all right, I don't understand any of it totally, but I am going to continue to choose you, Lord, my relationship with you, praying and doing things like I think you want me to do. So so that was really kind of like what solidified a lifelong relationship with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Was that through loss, which I think really sets you up to be a parent, is knowing that you like things go south, things are terrible, people die, you know.
Yeah.
So open to death.
Well, that's very interesting, Alicia, and I appreciate the way you're saying it because um, pain, tremendous pain, uh, becomes a fulcrum. It's a turning point for our souls, and we have choices to make when we're under tremendous pain. We can either turn away from God in bitterness and anger, or we can turn towards Him to seek the comfort. Jesus said, "Blessed are you who mourn; you will be comforted." There is a blessing in loving people enough so that you really do mourn. I don't mourn. I know a lot of people that die. I don't always mourn because I'm not always close to them.
Right.
And you can choose, as some people I know and love have done, to put a shell around your heart. It's like I'm gonna protect myself from pain. I'm not gonna be too close to anybody. Stuff happens. It's not gonna get to me anymore. And God, you're not getting to me anymore either
Right.
because you set
Right.
me up. And you could have done something. It could have been different. Like Mary and Martha both said to Jesus, if you had been here, our brother
Yeah.
wouldn't have died. Where the heck
Hmm.
were you when we wanted you and
Hmm.
needed you, you know? Um, and that's a whole nother discussion because he said, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, though they die, yet shall they live, talking about the resurrection. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die, meaning that they're alive with Christ today and their influence. Like when you're talking about Matt, I feel as closer to him than I did the day before he died. Because the day before he died, he's one of my four kids. I'm not
Right.
worried about him. He's at school. He's going to be fine. You know, I'll see him tonight at
Yeah.
dinner or whatever.
Yeah.
But when somebody's alive with the Lord who you love very much, they're very much alive with you, and your heart's always really tender to their ongoing influence. Um, so so you get married, you have a daughter, and then explain your emotions as a mom and what happens when you get pregnant again.
I was not really prepared for like how much I would love being a mom. I feel like that's like one of the big secrets that like our modern world doesn't share with women. Like, yeah, it might not, there's a lot of sacrifices, but there's a part of you that exists that you don't, there's a capacity to love and deal with sacrifice that exists that you just don't even know is available to you until you have a child, or until you adopt a child, or until you decide to be a mother to somebody in a sacrificial way. Because I know women are called to motherhood. It's not always natural motherhood. Um, so I loved it. Every time I had a kid, I wanted another one in the hospital room. I was
Really?
always like, I can't wait to do this again.
Wow.
And that was me after I had 6 C-sections. So it wasn't like I was, I had just had major surgery. Maybe it was the drugs. Just kidding. I know it wasn't. I would just look at that baby and I would just be like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, how come more people don't know about this? Um, so so yeah, I mean, I had been a working lady until I got married, and I had told Jamie when we were dating or talking about marriage that I wanted to be able to stay home with my kids. Um, and so, I really became someone who was home with Stella, our oldest daughter, who is 19 now. And there was a lot of learning. There was a lot of learning about, oh gosh, for as much as the difficulties that my mother and I had because of divorce, her family of origin, yada yada yada. Um, I got a glimpse of like how much she loves me. So that I feel like
How
that's a
much she had
gift.
sacrificed for you that you'd have no
Yeah.
recollection of,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Totally. And I feel like that is a gift that people who put off having kids or are like, I don't want to bring them into this world because of climate change. I'm like, you don't know what you're missing out on. Not even just for yourself, but just for your your capacity to really kind of like forgive your parents for whatever they did
Hmm.
to you and made your life difficult or whatever. Like it really did give me a kind of peace about not ease, but a peace about things with my mom. So so Stella was not quite a year old, and I had found out a month before she turned 1 that I was pregnant again. And then, I mean, here's the thing, it's exciting and it's scary because you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm gonna have another kid in July, and my oldest is not even gonna be 2 years old. I mean, that was like my norm. I had a kid like every other year for 8 years, and then I
Okay.
didn't have any more, which was its own heartbreak.
Okay. So
Um,
tell us what happened when you're pregnant with your second child.
So I go in for my 20-week ultrasound scan where they just check, they can tell you the gender, and we really hadn't found out the gender of the sex of the children before that. And but while I was there, they were like, "Oh, I have to go get a doctor," and they go out of the room and they come back, and I wasn't thinking anything of it. I was like, everything's great. And she comes back in and she says, "We found something in your abdomen. We're gonna have you go to your obstetrician right after this." And so I was kind of like, okay, and that was upsetting. I went there and he was the guy who has like absolutely no bedside manner. He was the funniest obstetrician ever. But he was like, "Yeah, so you have ovarian cancer." Or no, he didn't say that. What he said was, "You have a growth on your ovary," because they didn't know what it was yet. And I'm going to have to send you to uh, a gyne oncologist. We've made the appointment for you already. You're going to have to go see him on Monday because this was a Friday, and then you're going to have an MRI that same day, and then you're probably going to have surgery sometime next week. And I was like, wow,
What? You
yeah,
knew
okay,
nothing. You knew nothing before this.
no, no, that was it. I had no symptoms of any problem other than I was pregnant. And so then, of course, I left that appointment, got my daughter. She was with my mom, and I drove to where Jamie was working at the time. And I was like, so this is what's happening. I was kind of like, again, in this like altered
Shock.
state of,
Yeah.
yeah, just shock. And I was like, I don't know what it is. But, over that weekend, it was very much like the the guy had said it's probably what's called a borderline tumor. It's not usually a big deal. They just remove it, and you go on with your life. And so that's what they said. That's not what it was. I um I was actually so anyways, I don't know how much more you want me to go into that.
I want you to go into it because they told you
Okay.
basically, from what I've heard, that you needed to have an abortion and not have any more kids,
No,
right?
no, no. They did not say that. No. And so I was in the process of joining the Catholic Church actually, and I just read about this new saint named Saint Gianna, which, spoiler alert, that's the name of my second child, who I was pregnant with at the time, who had lived in Italy in the 60s, and she had this, it wasn't a tumor, it was something she had growing in her abdomen. She was pregnant with her fourth child, and they told her, they were like, "You're not going to survive. The baby's not going to survive. You should abort this child and move on with your life so that you're there for your husband and your other children." And she said, I will not abort this child. You do everything you can to save this child. I want to survive, but I choose this child over me. Right? It was not her intention. I don't think she knew that she died a week after the baby was born from all of the other problems that she had. And really, she had a problem that nowadays could have probably been dealt with. So I was
Okay,
aware of
now
this
that you told
story.
me that, I'll change my plan because I'm just thinking I should have her as a guest on the show.
Yeah, no,
Right.
she's gone. But her daughter's alive.
Well, that's neat.
There's another Gianna who travels around the United States and talks at pro-life conferences.
Really? How neat.
And yeah. Um
So
and
with you,
so
so in your case, they said we need to do surgery. What, after the birth?
right.
Okay.
No. So I went in and I met my oncologist. His name was Dr. Janicek. He's still practicing here in town. And he said, "All right, I had the MRI. He's like, you have a tumor. It's what happens is it can start to continue to grow because of all the growth hormones. We have to do a surgery on Wednesday. We're going to do a surgery this Wednesday. That's as soon as I can get you in. Um, you and Jamie and I were like, are you, what are you going to say? Are you going to say we have to terminate this pregnancy because we're not doing that? He's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying this child might not survive this surgery. But you need to do this surgery now for your sake and for the child's sake because this tumor will keep growing while you're pregnant. And it could kill you. If it keeps growing, it would most likely definitely kill the baby, but we'll go in there and we'll do it and we'll do everything we can to save, you know, to not disrupt the pregnancy. And so Jamie and I decided we wanted to know, what sex of the baby we were having. They did another ultrasound. We found out it was a girl, and we decided we were going to name her Gianna after this saint that I had just read about. So then we go into the surgery, and they removed my right ovary and my fallopian tube and the tumor. And then we kind of had to see if the baby was going to survive, and she did. And spoiler alert, she's 18. She's graduating from high school next month. So
How
so she's alive.
congratulations,
Yes.
congratulations.
Now
What
the
did they tell you
complication.
about future pregnancies and stuff?
So she was born in July. I had my surgery in March, and they were like, it's probably a borderline tumor. And then Dr. Janicek called me, and when your doctor calls you, it's never a good thing.
Yeah, yeah,
When it's the doctor who's making the phone call. He
right.
said, all right, so it was actually ovarian cancer. It wasn't a borderline tumor. It was stage one, so it was all encapsulated, but you are going to have surgery again in September, a couple months after the baby's born. And what we do is, I can't remember what it's called, but a lot of people, it's like a staging where they open your abdomen, they check to see if there's cancer anywhere else that wasn't
Mhm.
found from the first surgery. And so that's what's going to happen. And he had told me too that, what people usually do is they just if you've had ovarian cancer, you don't want it to come back. So we usually just remove the other ovary and then you just carry on with your life. And I was 32 at the time, so I was pretty young and I was like, well, I'd like to have more kids. And he's like, you got two kids. What's the difference? That kind of thing. And I'm like, listen, I understand, and you're welcome to that opinion. But I would like to have more children. Let's say we have this surgery and you're in my abdomen. If my left ovary does not have looks healthy, why can't I keep it? Which is like a whole nother issue. Why can't I keep a healthy part? And
Right.
he is like, you are the patient, I do what you want me to do. I advise you to remove your other ovary, but if you want to keep it, if it's healthy, I won't take it out. And so the baby was born, everything was great. She was healthy. I went in September, had the surgery. Again, these two surgeries, I don't know what the outcome is going to be. Is my daughter going to survive? She did. I go into this other surgery and it's just like the anguish I felt because I thought, am I going to emerge from this surgery knowing that I'm never going to have any more of my own children? Um, and yeah, I have two healthy children and that should be great, right? But I wanted to have more kids. I wanted to be able to have more of my own children. So I came out of that surgery and they had said, your other ovary looked great, and so we left it there. Um, I had a lot of people who questioned my decision, people close to me, just people in
People who
general.
love you, and want to make sure
Yes,
cancer doesn't come back in
yes,
your life, right?
yes. Which there is no making sure cancer doesn't come back in your life.
Hmm.
There just isn't. So there's that. So so yeah, it was and my husband, we talked about it. He's like, I feel like whatever it is that you feel the most peace doing is what I think you should do. And so when I thought about, there's numerous things. I wouldn't be able to have kids. I'd go through menopause. I would have all kinds of hormonal issues starting at the age of 32. So I was just like, if I want to keep a healthy part of my body. So anyways, that's what I did. I feel
Doesn't it make it more difficult to have kids if you only have one ovary?
Um, I don't really even know what the statistics are. I'm sure it complicates things. I'm sure it contributed to the fact that at a certain point, well, and then I had thyroid cancer, which is a whole nother, that was a few years later. So I had ovarian cancer in 2007, and then I had thyroid cancer in 2011. Again, I was a difficult patient and I didn't do exactly what the doctor wanted me to do.
Which
And
was what? What did the doctor want?
um, They wanted me to, they took out my thyroid totally. It was totally gone. And they wanted me to do a, what's it called? Radioactive iodine treatment, where you swallow this iodine and then you have to be away from people for like 3 days, and then
Hmm.
they do a scan of your body. And you know, I the medical community will tell you things like it's not a big deal. There's no problems. There's no complications, zero. But then you go and you look for stuff online, and there's people like, oh, I have done this, I have no taste, or I have done this, I have no smell. And the treatment was the same for somebody in my position, which had uh, tiny, tiny pieces of thyroid cancer, as it was if you had like stage 3 thyroid cancer.
Yeah.
And so again, I was like, I am declining this procedure.
Hmm.
And again, people that are close to me that love me thought I was being naive, ridiculous, selfish, all that kind of stuff. So
So basically, you declined something that they don't even want you near people. That it's sort of
yes,
like, it's not that it's contagious, but you're just so darn radioactive, and you would have it
yes,
inside you, right?
yes,
So, yeah.
yeah,
Wow. Okay, so you lived by the grace of God, and you had one,
yes.
you had another child, and then another
I
child, and
had,
then another
yeah, I had
child.
4 more children. Yeah. Yeah. But then, then I was old. When I had my last child, I was almost 39, and I had only one ovary and no thyroid, which are both hormonal situations. And I,
Yeah.
I kind of always think, well, that's just why I just never had any more kids.
Hmm.
So,
And do people ever say, and that's why you're a little bitchy sometimes, or anything like that?
my bitchiness preceded my children, but my children have definitely enhanced my incidence and intensity of bitchiness, I will say at times.
I don't know if it's okay to say that word on a Christian based podcast, but we'll scrub it if necessary. Alicia, it's a blessing to be with you. Um, and how do you and Jamie? Because most people say I got 2 kids and they're driving me crazy. 3, I'm definitely over the edge. And I actually think when the Bible says be fruitful and multiply, that we should try and at least go 2 times 2, or at least get in over your head with 3 kids.
Yeah,
Not just because you could lose one, but there is a dynamic of life and faith that you have to live by when you're
yeah,
outnumbered by your kids, right?
right.
When you
Yeah,
can't just manage it emotionally or whatever, where they don't
right.
all get intimidated by you, at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is where my bitchiness will come in, because I feel like people would be more willing to move to the other side of the world and be a missionary in Africa than they would be to consider having 3, 4, or just any number of children.
Yeah,
And I think, well, you have a great faith that is willing to propel you to the other side of the world, but that keeps you closed-minded towards having your own children. And there is nothing wrong with having your own children. It is not selfish
that's
to have
right.
your own children and not adopt or not foster a child. That is not a wrong thing. There are people that have their own children and foster and adopt as well, but it doesn't make you less of a Christian if you only have your own natural children.
It's true. So give a word of counsel to a woman. I remember when we had 3 kids and I was doing tons of ministry, and Christina said I feel like I'm going crazy, and I'm like,
Yeah,
basically I was saying, don't give me that. You got my money. I'm faithful to you. Pull it together.
yeah, yeah,
But I needed, what she really needed from me was a hug, and I'm sorry you're
yeah,
going through this, and that sort of thing. But with
yeah,
6 kids, you've had to navigate all of that stuff. What would you say to people who feel like they're going crazy, they're in over their head, and how do
I
you
would
actually
say,
enjoy life?
um, I have I have friends that are supportive of having numerous children. A lot of them have numerous children themselves, so you can complain to them. Because really, my husband doesn't want to hear me complain either. He's just like, yeah, whatever. Um, guys don't want to hear you complain.
Hmm.
That's like a feminine thing. Guys don't want to hear all the bitching. Oh, sorry. Um, so there's that. I would say you take it one day at a time. And also it goes by so fast. And then suddenly you have like adults who aren't necessarily any easier, but
No, it's a whole new set of challenges, right?
it's a whole new set of issues, but but they are also their own person. I went to this like pro-life dinner like 15 years ago, and this guy, I wish I knew who he was. He said he was talking about children and especially about unplanned pregnancies, and he was saying, um the Bill of Rights talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he says it doesn't say life, liberty, and happiness. The pursuit of happiness is what is
Hmm.
God given to everybody, right? You're not going to be happy all the time. Life is not going to be easy. But then I also say if you are a Christian, you can look to the cross and see all of the sacrifice and the reality of what Christianity is. Like when you really think about it, it's like Christianity is worshiping a man who was nailed to a cross, buried for 3 days, and rose again. It's not a rosy thing that a lot of people want to, oh yes, let me follow a savior who was crucified. I mean, but a lot of people do, obviously. I mean, I hope you understand what I'm saying, but there is sacrifice. And I also feel like people are more willing to sacrifice to train for a marathon. I'm like, come on, you can do it, people. You can
Yeah,
raise your kids.
yeah.
It's when I would be out in public with all of my kids, I was a spectacle, no doubt, especially when I would be pregnant and I would have my other kids with me. And the number of people that would say to me, women would say, I wanted more, or my husband wanted more, and I said, all I can do is three, or vice versa. The husband would say, I always wanted to have more, but my wife just couldn't handle it, or whatever. But you can handle it. You can do hard things, and raising kids is hard, and it's worthwhile. And I think too, we live in a world that isn't very kid centric. Like I I'm not a super organized person. I don't have a chore chart. I suck at it. I'm always having to tell people to clean up after themselves. My house is not always presentable. It's sanitary. It's not presentable. Living on one income, we had lots of sacrifices that we made. We didn't always get to go on vacations. Um, but I have kids that they really love each other. They really drive each other crazy too. But like my teen kids, they go and hang out together, you know.
Isn't that beautiful?
They
Yeah.
when one of them comes home from wherever they are, the other one's like, "Oh my gosh, well, so what was happening? How, who'd you see it? Blah blah blah." And they want to get the download from the other person, and then it can turn on a dime, and people are angry and yelling at each other. I don't want to diminish that because I have a good friend too who's like, when she's out in public, people will be like, "Oh my gosh, it's so great! You have so many kids. How wonderful!" She's like, "I never want to be like, yeah, it's super easy." She's like,
Yeah.
"No," I'm like, "It's hard, but it's worth it."
Yeah. Amen.
And I really do feel like in modern American culture, we encourage people to do hard things, except for to have a lot of their own children. And I don't understand it. And that's coming from somebody who's had a very hard time. My husband was a teacher, then he left and he went to law school and then he studied for the bar and then he was like a lawyer. And we went into law school with 2 kids, came out with 4 kids.
And debt,
Um,
right?
yes, law school debt. We've paid for that. We didn't plan things out very well, but here we are. We're alive.
Amen.
Um, it's funny. I've been reading this book, and then you can stop me if I keep going on. But I just happened to start reading this book by Joseph Pieper about the four virtues, and I was so struck with one of the he was talking about prudence is the mother of all virtues, and that prudence is making the good right choice all the time. And back when I decided about keeping my ovary, it was a good choice. It was a choice I wanted to make. I didn't know how that was going to turn out. And I did live in fear of cancer coming back, but I mostly lived in fear of cancer coming back and people being like, "Oh, we told you so. We
Hmm.
told you that was a bad decision." You know? But and it could have come back and it didn't, and I had to monitor it and I had to pay bills and I had to go have ultrasounds all the time and get blood work done and all of that kind of stuff. But thanks be to God, it didn't come back. But if it did, it still wouldn't mean that having decided to keep my ovary was the wrong decision. Does that make sense?
Yep, yep, you're exactly right. And I want to do a caveat for some of our listeners too. Alicia, you have a gift, okay? And the gift is to be able to appreciate the beauty and the wonder of a newborn baby, even when your own body's in a lot of pain. That's a really special gift. Um, and not everybody has it. So it's going to be easier for you to say, come on, suck it up and have a dozen kids or what, half a dozen kids or whatever, than it is for some people. Because some people, just like your body reacted with cancer, some people's bodies react with mania or whatever other manifestations of the fact that we're living in a fallen world and
Hmm.
our bodies are only temporary. But to me, the takeaway from what you're saying is that whenever God calls us to sacrifice, there is a reward. And you're tasting the reward, just the beginning of the reward. And it's going to be eternal because your kids are going to follow the Lord and have their own families. And someday you could have 20, like my mom has over 20 grandkids. And even though
Yeah,
her
yeah,
husband abandoned her, she was
yeah,
revered. And we're going to go celebrate her 100th birthday on April
yeah.
20th, 21st. And it's because she was loved by this diverse brood of
Yes.
people that you could call them heathens. Half of us are heathens. But we all had the same mom who we loved, who loved the Lord and loved us, which is a gift.
Yeah, yeah. I agree.
Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
being my guest here today.
You're
Alicia,
welcome.
Alicia Hanson can be found online at, where would somebody look you up, on Facebook or whatever, or just, Earth Mom Hanson. You can't miss
I
her.
don't have a blog.
Maybe someday, because I know you're a gifted
You can,
writer too.
I'll be your friend in real life. You can talk to Mark and he can send my phone number on it. We'll hang out.
Thank you very much. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as me. Alicia, you're a blessing, and God bless each one of you with your families, because the best is yet to come for all of us.
Yes. Amen.